Shalom. We are continuing our limud of Sefer Melachim Aleph. David HaMelech has died. Shlomo has become a king. And Perek Gimel begins with something that's already a bit disturbing. And that is, Vayischaten Shlomo es Parai melech Mitzrayim, Vayikach es bas Parai, Vayivieha el ir David, ad kaloso livnot es beiso v'es beis Hashem, v'es chaimas Yushalayim soviv. So the pasuk says that Shlomo married the daughter of Parai melech Mitzrayim. He brought her to Ir David, which was David HaMelech's city outside of Yerushalayim, and that's where they lived until he finished building both his palace and the Beis HaMikdash, which we're going to read happened later, and strengthened the walls of Yerushalayim. So here we have obviously something that was very, very tragic, because we're going to see that eventually the daughter of Paro was Nimshach to Avodah Zarah, and that brought many, many Averas to Klal Yisrael, and that eventually was one of the reasons for the split of the 10 tribes who rebelled against Rechavam, that was Shlomo's son. The Rambam is masber that Avada it's a Dover Pashut, that Shlomo did not marry a non-Jewish woman. Obviously, it was the case that Parai, Bas Parai, converted to Yiddishkeit, and there was a Beisim that was Makabel her. But the problem was that, generally speaking, we're not supposed to be Makabel Gerim at a time when Jews are powerful and prosperous, and in particular, we're not Makabel Gerim, the Gemara says, in the days of David and Shlomo, because we have to be chayshesh that their motives are not sincere. When Klal Yisrael is suffering, when we are oppressed, then Einoch Hinami, if somebody wants to become Jewish, you can assume that they're sincere. But here, although her gerus was externally proper, but hochiach seifei al techilase, the fact that she was nimshach to Avodah Zarah indicates she shouldn't have been accepted in the first case. But at least initially, Shlomo's motives were not improper, and indeed that's why it says afterwards that Shlomo was a righteous person who followed the ways of David. Rashi also brings an interesting medrash that says the very Shimi ben Gera that Shlomo killed, or had killed, because he was meirid against Malchus Beis David, was also Shlomo's Rebbe. And as long as Shimi ben Gera was alive, he was not nischaten with Bas Parai, and only after Shimi died was Shlomo nichshel. And Rashi concludes, Mikan Amru, from here the Chachamim said, Li'olam yador adam b'makayim rabbi. It is always good to live in proximity to your Rebbe. Your Rebbe will be a good hashpa'ah. But be it as it may, the pasuk says that Shlomo was mischaten with Bas Parai, and rak ha'am mizabchim babamais, and people, however, were bringing korbanos on private altars. Ki lo nivne bayis l'shem Hashem ad yamim mehem, because the Beis HaMikdash had not yet been rebuilt. So Lamaisa, it's very, very clear from the Gemara that there was no Aveira for people to be maktir b'bamais, because after the Chorban of Mishkan Shilai, when the Bama Gedela, the communal altar, was in Nov, and then in Givain for a period of over 50 years, the Bamas were mutter. Shlomo is not maschil to begin the Beis HaMikdash, we're going to read, until the 4th year of his reign. So for the first 3 years of his reign, and even during the construction of the Beis HaMikdash, the Bamais were in fact mutter. So this is different than this pasuk that appears in many other places. Usually when it talks about the people being maktir b'Bamais, it is telling me that that was an Aveira. Here, Itaka was something that was mutter. And, in spite of the fact that we seemingly have described that Shlomo did a sin by marrying Bas Parai, the pasuk says no. Vayav Shlomo es Hashem lalechas b'chukos David aviv. Shlomo loved Hashem, to follow the ways of David, his righteous father. Rak babamais u'mizabechu maktir. But he himself brought korbanos on the bamais, because al pi din it was mutter. But Rashi points out that even though Al Pi Din was mutter, but the Navi is marames a certain genus, that why did it take him 4 years before he began the construction of the Beis HaMikdash? After all of the gold and the silver and the materials had already been accumulated by David, his father. Be it as it may, though, if there's no Beis HaMikdash, the main Mizbeach for the Korban Tamid and the Korbanos Sibor is located in Givon, in Vayelech HaMelech Givono, Lizbarach Sham Kihi Abama HaGedola. He went to Givon to bring a Korban because that was the main Mizbeach. This was the Mizbeach HaNecheshes that Moshe had made, that had been in the Mishkan, and then it was in Shiloh, and then it was in Noiv, and now it's in Givon. And he brought many, many korbanos. Aleph, Eilis, Yalesh, Shlomo, Al Mizbeach Hahu. He brought 1,000 korbanos in one day to give thanks to Hashem. And Begivon Nira Hashem El Shlomo B'Chalom Alayla. And that night in Givon, Hashem appeared to Shlomo in a dream at night. Vayomer Elokim, and Hashem said to him in the dream, Sha'al ma etein lach. Ask for whatever you want, whatever is most important to you, I will give. Vayomer Shlomo, presumably Shlomo was answering in the dream, Ato asisa matzacha David avi chesed gadol kasher halach lefanecha beyemes u'b'tzedakah u'v'yishras leva v'imach. You, Hashem, always treated your servant David, my father, with tremendous loving kindness, because he walked before you in truth and dedication, in righteousness, with a straight heart. Vatishmor lo es hachesed hagadol hazeh, and you preserved that chesed, that it would continue not just to him, but to his progeny, to his children. Vatitein lo ben yoshev al kisei kayem hazeh, and you gave him a son who would sit on his throne. What a chesed it is. V'yata Hashem, and now Hashem Elokai atoyim lachtos abdecha tachas David avdi. You made me, your humble servant, to be melech in place of David, my father. V'anoichi nar kotan, and I am a young child. Rashi gives us a cheshbon that Shlomo HaMelech was only 12 years old. He was not even bar mitzvah. Lo edat say suvo. I don't know coming or going. How can I run a nation? How can I be a melech? How can I take the place of David, my father? I am only a child. V'yavdecha b'teich amcha asher bacharta, and I am your servant in the nation that you chose for your people, Am Rav, and they are a multitudinous nation. Asher lo yimanev lo yisafer meirov, they cannot be counted. By the way, it's interesting that although we already read that Shlomo married Bas Parai, some say this must be an example of Ein Muktim U'Ma'ucher, because if indeed at the time of the Chalaim in Givon he is only 12 years old, it's not likely that he got married as a Katan, because a Katan cannot have Kedushin. So some want to say that the marrying of Bas Parai is actually a later event. But however you understand it, he's pleading with Hashem that I am the king of a great nation with so many people. So what is it that I ask? I ask for wisdom. I ask for chachma. V'nasata li'amoscha leiv sheimea lishpait es amcha lahavin bein taiv l'ra. May you give to your servant a heart that can hear and understand, to judge, to know the difference in good and evil, innocence and guilt, to be able to understand what needs to be understood. Ki mi yuchal lishpait es amcha hakaved hazeh. Who can possibly be a shofet for such a kaved, a difficult people? Again, he's not saying Klal Yisrael is difficult, but there are complicated questions. As Rashi says, they have asakim rabim, they have all sorts of different types of transactions that they're involved in. I need chachma. And the pasuk says, Vayitav hadavar b'einei Hashem. And this request found favor in the eyes of God. Ki sha'al Shlomo as hadavar hazeh, because that is all Shlomo wanted, was chachma. Vayomer Elokim elav, and Hashem said to him, Yan asher sha'alta es hadavar hazeh, because you asked for chachma, you didn't ask for gashmias. V'lo sha'alta lecha yamim rabim, you didn't ask for a long life. V'lo sha'alta lecha aisher, you didn't ask for wealth. V'lo sha'alta nefesh oivecha, and you didn't ask that you would be able to avenge or destroy your enemies. V'sha'alta lecha havein lishmoa mishpat, all you want is to understand, to be able to implement justice. Hine asisi kidvarecha, I will give you what it is that you want. Hine nasati lecha leiv chacham v'navon, I have given you a heart of chachma and bina. Asher kamaycha lo haya lefanecha, there was no one like you beforehand. V'acharecha lo yakum kamaycha, and there will never be anyone like you. Right? This is the famous teaching that Shlomo HaMelech was the Chacham Mikol Adam. He was not the greatest Navi. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Navi, but he had the greatest level of Chachma. And then Hashem says, V'gam asher lo sha'alta nasati lach, and because your priority was Chachma, I will also give you everything you didn't ask for. Gam Aisher, I'll give you wealth. Gam Kavod, honor. Asher lo haya kamecha ish b'melachim kol yamecha. There never was a king that will have your wealth and your honor. V'yim telech b'drachai lishmor chukayim mitzvosai kasher halach David avicha. And if you continue to follow my ways and keep my laws and mitzvos, as David your father kept them, Varachti es yamecha, I will give you arichas yamim. So this is very interesting. The wealth, the Aisher and the Kavod, Shlomo is going to get no matter what. The arichos yamim, that depends on following the ways of David. So it's interesting that the arichos yamim is indeed going to be conditional. Vayikat Shlomo, and Shlomo awakens. V'hinei chalaim, it was a dream, but he knew it was coming from Hashem. And when he left Givain, and he came back to Yerushalayim, V'yavi Yerushalayim, V'yamid Lefnei Aron Bris Hashem. Remember, at this point, the Mizbeach HaNechayches is in Givain, but the Aron HaKodesh is in Yerushalayim. David had brought the Aron to Yerushalayim. So when Shlomo HaMelech got back to Yerushalayim, he went to the Aron HaKodesh, V'yal Olos, because again, technically, although the Mizbeach HaNechayches was in Givain, but the Bamas were permitted. So he was Vade allowed to bring Korbanos in the Makom of the Aron. The Eilas are burnt offerings, totally burnt. Vayas Shlomim, and peace offerings, part of it is burnt on the Mizbeach, and the rest is eaten by the Yisraelim. Vayas Mishtel L'chol Avadim, he made a party and a celebration for all of his Avadim in gratitude to this chalaim, to this nevuah, to this gift of chachma. And then we now have a very, very famous story in which the chachma of Shlomo was very apparent. Az tavayna shtayim nashim zaynais ala melech, two women that are zaynais came before the king. So here there's always a big machloikas. Rachav was also called the zayna, and we had the same machloikas. One opinion takes it very, very literally, that these were prostitutes. These were women of immoral character. Others say that a zayna is a pundakis, is an innkeeper that is mecheres mezaynais. So be it as it may, Lamaisa, these women don't seem to have a husband. So the first pshat actually seems fairly plausible. But these two women came before Shlomo. Vataimer Aisha Achas, and one of the women said, Bi Adoni, please my master, Ani Vaisha Azais. I and this other woman, Yaishas Vaisachad, we're living in one house. V'elad Ima Babayas, and both of us gave birth to children at the same time. Two kids, her baby, my baby. Vahi B'yam Ashlishi Lidati. And the third day, when my baby was 3 days old, or on the third day, Vateled gam ha'isha hazai, she gave birth. V'anachnu yachzav ein zori tanu b'bayit. And we are alone in the house. Again, there's no husband. Zulasi shtayim anachnu b'bayit. We're the only two people in the house. Vayamas ben ha'isha hazai shlayla. Asher shachva Aleph. So this woman says, the child of the other woman died at night because she rolled over on him and he suffocated. Vatakam b'toich halayla, and in the middle of the night she got up while I was sleeping. Vatikach es b'ni miyetzli, and she took my son who was lying next to me. V'yamascha yeshena, and I was sleeping. V'tashkiveyu b'cheika, and she put it in her lap. V'yes b'na, and the dead body of her son Hames, hishkiva b'cheiki, she put in my lap. V'yokum b'bayker, and when I got up in the morning, lahainik es b'ni, to nurse my son, v'hine meis, behold, I see a dead kid, but this is not my kid, this is her kid. V'yes bonein elav b'boker, and I looked at his facial features. I looked at his face. V'hine lo haya b'ni asher yoladati, this is not the child I gave birth to. That's how she knew there was a switch. V'taymer ha'isha ha'cheres, but the other woman says, lo ki, it is not as you say, b'ni achai u'b'nei chames. It is my son that's alive, and it's your son that died, and therefore the baby is mine. V'zaysemeres, and the other woman says, lo ki, b'nei chames u'b'nei achai. Your son is the dead one. So they're fighting. Who is the mother of this child? One woman says me, the other woman says her. Vatitabernu lifnei hamelech, and they're speaking in front of the king. Vayomer hamelech, and Shlomo hamelech, a young boy, 12 years old, says, Zaysei meres. One woman says, Ze b'nei achai u'b'nei chames. V'zaysei meres lo ki b'nei chames u'b'nei achai. What do I do? Vayomer hamelech. So the king says, I have a perfect solution. K'chuli cherev. Give me a sword. V'yaviu hacherev l'fnei hamelech, and bring the sword to the king. Vayomer hamelech, and the king said, right? The Mishnah says, Shnayim eichsen b'talis. Two people are holding on to a talis. One says kula shali, and one says kula shali. Yachleiku. You're arguing who has the kid, who owns the child. Let us split the kid. Gizru es hayeled hachai l'shnayim. Tenu es achatzi liyachas, v'es achatzi liyachas. Split, everybody gets equal. V'ataymer ha'isha asher b'no achaya lamelech. But the true mother, the one whose child was alive, said to the king, Ki nichmeru rachamecha al b'noah. She was filled with mercy. She would rather give up her child than kill her child. Vataymer bi Adonai, please my master. If you're going to cut the child in half unless we resolve this machlokas, tenu la es hayalud hachai. Give her the child. V'hames al temisuhu, and do not put him to death. V'zaysei meres, but the other woman says, if we can't resolve it, let's split it. Gam li, gam loch. Me and you. Lo yiyeh, should not have the live child. Gazayru, cut him up. Vayan hamelech. And Shlomo then said, Vayemer, Tanu la sayulud hachai. Give the mother who is willing to give up her child. She is the mother. Hames lo temisu hi imai. Because a mother would rather give up a child than to kill a child. And therefore, the one that is willing to give up their child, that is the mother. I don't want to get too involved in current and political issues. But sometimes, Rahman al-Itzlan, we have in modern society women, Baruch Hashem, usually not from women, who feel they cannot carry a baby, they cannot raise a baby. Sometimes they're single mothers. so they want to abort the baby. But there are wonderful organizations in Eretz Yisrael, Efrat, in America, in Shifra's Arms, that help these mothers be able to raise a child. But if chas v'shalom, they cannot raise the child, at least let the child be born, and then give the child for adoption, so that a family can raise the child and love the child. And I've heard with my own ears that sometimes women might say, I could never give up my child for adoption. I'd rather have an abortion. Again, the Aniyas Daiti, it's very, very striking that you see exactly the opposite here. The mother who loves her child would rather give up the child so the child will live than let the child die. This, I think, is an important remez for contemporary situations. But be it as it may, the fact that Shlomo HaMelech was able to figure this out established him as a great in Chachma. Vayishmu kol Yisrael es hamishvat asher shavet HaMelech. All of Israel heard about the judgment of the king. Vayiru mipnei HaMelech, and they had reverence for the king. This is the reverence of Kavod. Ki ra'u ki chachmas Elokim b'kirbai, that the wisdom from Hashem was in his heart. Laseis mishpat, to rule in accordance with mishpat, judgment, justice, and emes, and to be mavarer which of the various tainas are going to be true. So this is the end of Perek Gimel.